Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to click here on another video. And today I wanted to talk about the fact that I got to check out the new Universal theme park, Epic Universe. I got to go via a preview ticket, and I actually surprised my wife. She did not know we were going to do this. I told her that it was going to be a fun date day, and then when we pulled up to Epic Universe, she was incredibly excited. And so yeah, I got to check out the park early, but one thing that they tell you before you go into the park if you purchase these tickets is that they are in technical rehearsal. So there is that element of certain things that are not going to be running. There's going to be certain shows and certain experiences that will not be the same as they will be once the park officially opens later in May, but also that there was going to be the likelihood of certain rides going down throughout the course of the day. So we went in with that expectation that we weren't getting the full experience. I was going to film a vlog style video, but since I promised my wife this was going to be like a date day, I didn't want to make it a situation where I was stopping to film myself throughout the day. So what I did instead was film and take pictures of things while I was at the park with the intention to talk to you guys about it, give my general review of the experience while also being able to show you guys some of the footage that I took while I was there. So let's get started. We got to the park and we were incredibly excited, and you walk through those the entrance into the area that they call Celestial Park, which is the hub in the center of the park. That's essentially a big circle, and there's a couple of attractions there, but really what you want to get to is all the movie themed sections. And so we walked in immediately. The park is beautiful. I think when you look at a lot of modern day, theme park expansions, what Disney has done with things like Galaxy's Edge or the Pandora section, or things like the Harry Potter sections that have been expanded into the Universal theme parks, immersion has been a big part of modern day theme parks. They've been a huge part of making you feel like I need to go see that section. I need to go ride that ride. And so I think the downside, though, that a lot of these parks have had adding these incredibly immersive sections is that they're being added to theme parks that already have a little bit more of an old school theme park approach in terms of old school theming, where that immersion wasn't as heavy as it is for the modern day expansions. And the benefit that Epic Universe has immediately is that it's built with that kind of immersion in mind. So immediately when you walk into Epic Universe, the world is just gorgeous. Everything looks incredible, top tier architecture, top tier attention to detail, and that was something that I loved immediately walking into this theme park. And so after we got there, we ended up making a right as we got in to head to the first area, which is the Isle of Berk from the How to Train Your Dragons movies. Now, I have a video actually coming soon for the trilogy of How to Train Your Dragon that I actually just watched for the very first time. If you follow me over on Letterboxd, you'll see that I actually reviewed and rated the films over there. But yeah, this was my very first time seeing the films properly. So being able to go to the Isle of Berk in the theme park was really cool. And again, as I already said, and I probably will say many times over the course of this video, the attention to detail was just phenomenal. All the dragons, some of the animatronic dragons that were going on throughout the course of this section, it was really cool. Now, this section had 3 different rides that you could ride, and immediately we rode Hiccup's Wing Gliders, which is like a roller coaster style one. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was pretty cool. In a lot of ways, a pretty straightforward, standard roller coaster, but something that kids and adults can enjoy that isn't really overly crazy, but it's really enjoyable. They definitely lean into some of the, lore behind How to Train Your Dragons. There's some cool animatronics of Hiccup and Toothless, which was really cool to see. And throughout the course of the ride, you have the How to Train Your Dragon music that I think definitely leans into the overall spirit of the franchise. I really enjoyed that ride, and I thought it was a great way to start our day. After that, we went on over to the water ride, which is called Fire Drill. This one's an interactive boat ride, as they put it, which is essentially like any other kind of game at a theme park where you have a blaster or a gun of some sort and you're shooting targets. This is exactly what this was, but with like kind of just water sprayers. It was cool. It was fun. We got pretty wet while we did it, but it's the kind of ride that I think is definitely going to be more for a younger audience. And after having done it, I can't necessarily say I'm clamoring to do it again, but I will say I thought it was fun again in terms of the theming. And with this being our second ride of the day, we were pretty excited. And I should mention, these 2 rides up to this point, we'd waited maybe 30 to 40 minutes for, with the Fire Drill water ride having gone down at a certain point throughout it, but we were still early in the day and we weren't even stressing it. After the fire drill ride, we did walk around the area a little bit, just kind of taking a look at some of the options they had to eat and drink. We didn't wait in some of the long lines for some of the food and drinks, so I can't necessarily give you a full review on a bunch of different food in the park, because some of it, like usually, is very expensive, but a lot of the lines for some of these sections were pretty long and it just wasn't worth it to us. But it was cool to go around and see all the attention to detail when it comes down to How to Train Your Dragon, and then most notably, it was really nice to see some of the animatronics like this one. After that, we went back into Celestial Park. We went to one of the rides I was the most anticipating, and it ended up being my favorite ride in the entire day, and that is Stardust Racers, which is a roller coaster very much akin to an old Islands of Adventure roller coaster known as Dueling Dragons, where the base gist is that you have two different carts with two different groups of people on it that go at the exact same time. And throughout the course of the ride, you have certain moments where the coasters are kind of intermingling or spinning around each other, which was really cool to see. I used to love Dueling Dragons at Islands of Adventure, but unfortunately, at a certain point, they kind of like stopped doing the dueling side of it, where sometimes one would go off with the other one still being loaded up with people, which was a bummer. So it was nice to have a new ride that feels a lot more in line with what Dueling Dragons was all about. I had a lot of fun riding this ride, and I think without a doubt, it was my favorite experience in the park, without a doubt. After that, we headed on over to the new Wizarding World of Harry Potter section, which is known as Ministry of Magic. And so this takes us into, I believe, Paris. That is a location that you can see in the Fantastic Beast films. I will say immediately, again, the immersion is incredible. If you've been to the other two Universal theme park expansions for Harry Potter, then you know that they definitely do not hold back when it comes down to overall look, feel, vibe, the music, the butterbeer, all the little details that make you feel like you're in Harry Potter. And this section was no different. I really enjoyed walking around this area. My wife and I got some drinks at the bar they had there that ended up giving our stomach a little bit of a problem for about 20-30 minutes, but that thankfully did go away. But yeah, we were able to walk around this section. They have a circus show there that I was not able to see just due to trying to prioritize the theme park rides, but for the most part, it was a really cool section visually. Now, Ministry of Magic. It's one of the most popular rides that people want to get on there. Of course, it's one of the most popular at P, but it is the only ride that is hidden behind a virtual queue. This is something we've seen a lot more in recent years, specifically from things like Disney, that they've done it for things like Rise of the Resistance or Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, or things like Tron Light Cycle Run, or whatever the name of that ride is. I was unfortunately really upset to see that they had a virtual queue for this ride, because we tried at the different time slots that were available, and it seems like many people, including ourselves, had many struggles with the virtual queue system on the Universal app, and it led to us never getting able to ride the ride. And at certain points throughout the day, they were allowing people to go in and at least see the atrium before you get on the ride, to at least see the architecture of it and just see what it looked like. But every time we went to go and try to get inside the atrium, they said they weren't letting people into the atrium. At a certain point, they said delayed. So I think people who even got the virtual queue weren't even able to get into the ride. And then at a certain point, they just shut down the ride altogether. So yeah, immediately we ran into a snag. We came back hours later hoping to get on the ride, to no avail. And so that was definitely one of the biggest disappointments, because Harry Potter is a huge part of my wife's life. I love Harry Potter as well, but she loves that world. And so I was excited to take her to the park specifically for that, with no knowledge that it was behind a virtual queue. So to then go not have that experience with the virtual queue go well whatsoever. There was even times that we got the virtual queue to open and it showed us a time slot that was available, only for us to click it, hit submit, and only for it to say, sorry, this time slot is not available anymore. So it was really frustrating. There was 3 different time slots to try to get the virtual queue throughout the day. We tried it all 3 to no avail. It was really heartbreaking, honestly. It was sad to see my wife so disappointed, but thankfully we were still having a great time. So moving on now to the next section, we ended up going to Dark universe, which was something I was probably the most excited for. If you guys have been following this channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of horror, but the Universal monsters are some of my favorite characters of all time. I've covered many of the classic Universal horror monster films here on the channel if you guys are interested. And so, yeah, going into this park, I was incredibly excited, most notably for the main ride I think most people are going to talk about, which is Monsters Unleashed, the Frankenstein Experiment. It's a dark ride, very much akin to the first Harry Potter ride that's at Islands of Adventure, where you are in this kind of like 4 or 5 seater vehicle that is attached to an arm and it moves you around. And over the course of this, you get to see all of the Universal horror monsters that you know and love. And like a lot of other things that Universal has done, there are screens in portions of this ride where you see the events taking place on a screen. But for the most part, I thought those screens were pretty cool. The visuals of it were really cool. But what made this ride for me was majority of it was practical. The sets and the animatronics. The entirety of the ride had a bunch of animatronics where you get to see Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, things like Phantom of the Opera, Igor, as well as Creature from the Black Lagoon. The whole gang is here and you get to see them in full animatronic form, and I just thought that was beautiful. As a huge fan of animatronics, as a huge fan of practical effects, it was incredible to be on a ride where I could see some of the most iconic horror characters of all time face to face in a really, really well done way. This was easily my second favorite ride of the day. The only reason that Stardust Racers took the advantage for me was the fact that it had the speed to it. There was that craziness of a roller coaster that was a little bit more exciting. But I think when it comes down to theming, when it comes down to attention to detail, Monsters Unleashed was probably my favorite. Now, the second ride in this area is called The Curse of the Werewolf, which is a roller coaster, and we went to it right after Monster Unleashed to find out that it was closed for at least a few hours. We did end up returning to this area at night where we finally got to get on the ride. We waited about 50 minutes for it. The line for Monsters Unleashed was awesome. I love the aesthetic of the entire line. I thought that it was super cool, and so I could have waited in that line forever just looking at all the little details that were part of the monster universe. When it came down to The Curse of the Werewolf, the line was cool. You know, it was themed in a way that was very much in line with what you would expect, you know, a werewolf ride to be. Once we got on the ride, what I could say is that it was enjoyable. It was a fun coaster, but I think in the world of coasters from big theme parks, it was a little bit lackluster, and most notably because the only real thing that gives it its identity is this one section in the middle of the ride where you kind of like teeter-totter. You go into this building where there's a werewolf animatronic, but you go through that building so fast that it's hard to see him. It's more about the roar and the lights that are flashing in there. And I went at night where it would have probably been the best to see him, where the lights were shining on him, and I could only ever catch a glimpse of him as we passed by because of how quick you run through that building. And every time you did it like 2 or 3 times, and then the roller coaster just kind of came to an end. I would say that overall the ride was probably a 50 to 60 second experience, maybe a little bit longer, but there wasn't much to it that really made it feel like a monsters ride, like it was a big part of Dark Universe. So that was a bit disappointing to end the day with, but the ride was still fun for what it was. It's nice to be on a coaster in general, but I think compared to some of the top tier stuff we saw in the park, it was definitely a letdown, especially compared to Monsters Unleashed right next door. And then the last section we went into that I think that most people are really excited for is the Super Nintendo world, the Mario world. And so immediately going into this section, the attention to detail is insane. I grew up loving the Mario games. I grew up loving Nintendo consoles. And so as a kid, it was a huge kind of goal to be able to go to some sort of Nintendo world. So when I heard that they were doing that, I was incredibly excited. So finally being able to step into the area, I mean, the attention to detail was just flawless. And I would say across the entire park, in terms of just the look of everything, it is so well made, and the Nintendo section is no different. The music, all the different characters, the colors, the vibrancy of it, there's so many little things you can do, little random rooms you can find yourself to go into and do some mini games and all these different things that I thought was really cool. The section now features 3 rides, and this unfortunately is where my biggest disappointment in the day did come in. The first ride we rode was the Mario Kart ride, and I will start this off by saying that the queue for the Mario Kart ride was phenomenal. Walking through it was incredible. Again, the attention to detail was so spot on. To be able to walk through sets of Mario in live action, full scale, was just amazing. I don't think anybody's gonna go there and deny that part. The Mario Kart ride, though, after you get into the section where they give you the pre-show, they have you wear a Mario cap that kind of snaps onto your head, where you're gonna, once you get on the ride, snap on AR goggles, augmented reality, where once you're actually in the ride and you have the steering wheel in hand and all that jazz, you're going to have the opportunity to see the characters that are in the race with you throughout the map. And this, for me, was the biggest disappointment for sure. Firstly, I don't think the actual experience of the way that the Mario Kart moved was great. The sets were incredible, so oftentimes I kept wanting to peek up my AR goggles just to see the sets, because again, just like the ride and just like the entire section, the entire bit of just, you know, architecture and all the detail, all of that was phenomenal. And it was just the AR that I thought took away from the experience. There was a little bit of what the hell's going on. You're shooting shells at different characters, but it didn't really feel like it did much, honestly. And it felt like the kart was stopping and starting, stopping and starting, stopping and starting. And so it was a bit of a mixed bag for me, if I'm completely honest, in terms of how the kart actually moved. It honestly did not leave me with any sort of inkling to want to ride the ride again. I would actually honestly rather walk through the line and then exit the second that the ride is about to start, because I just thought the ride was incredibly lackluster. The vehicle did not move in a fun and exciting Mario Kart way. The AR element for me was distracting to the sets, because there was times where you could see the set well, and there was times you couldn't see the set well at all because of how much was going on in front of your eyes. And so that was a big letdown for me, because I really wanted that ride to be incredible. The second ride that we rode was Yoshi, which is an Omni mover that is kid friendly. And I'll just say this flat out, this is like for preschool kids. This is for like the youngest amount of kids that you have, or the youngest aged kids that you can find. By no means is this a ride that's gonna really do anything for anybody who's even a teenager or up. My wife and I were actually quite surprised at how lackluster this ride was. Again, we knew it was for kids, but we were expecting it to at least be a cute, fun time. A lot of the animatronics weren't working. Again, I'll give them at least a little bit of grace because of the fact that they were in technical rehearsal, but a lot of the animatronics weren't working. And we were just kind of going through, and you click on these 3 eggs as you see the eggs pop up in the ride. And that's it. There's really nothing to it. It was incredibly slow. There wasn't anything to it. And compared to the really incredible sets and locations and things that you saw in the other Mario rides, I mean, it just looked dull. There wasn't anything to it. It was a very bland ride in the entire park that looked pretty phenomenal. For whatever gripes I had with other rides, I wasn't really overly excited about it. And then the last ride that we rode before going to do Curse of the Werewolf, which was technically the last one, but we went back there. The last ride that we rode in the Mario section was the Donkey Kong Country Minecart Madness. And this was a ride we were incredibly excited to do. It was the one that people were saying was the best one. It had the longest wait, and we ended up waiting over an hour and a half for this ride because it shut down, started, shut down, started, shut down, and started multiple times. And so that was a big disappointment for us as we were sitting there. A lot of people were leaving the line. Sometimes people would start leaving the line, and then they would say the line was back up, and so people would try to get their spots back. We'd move for a few minutes, then they'd be like, hey, the Minecart Madness is down again. And then they say, okay, we're time to get going again. So after about over an hour and a half, we finally got to ride the ride, and this was fun. I thought it was an enjoyable time. By no means a standout for me in the park, which definitely left the entire Mario section for me being a disappointment. I wish that this section was more exciting for me. I wish that I was more excited about going back to the Mario section. My wife and I both agree that the Mario section for us now has become something that the next time we go, we'll go get a drink in another section, and we'll come into the Mario section a little tipsy, just being able to enjoy the setting and feel like a kid in the location, and not so much for the rides. The rides for me are not on the same level of the quality of architecture and detail, and compared to the other rides in the park, I think the Mario rides are genuinely some of the worst that I rode in the day. As far as food, we did try a couple of things here and there, and for the most part, it just felt like theme park food. I did not get a reservation for Atlantic, the nice restaurant that they have there that's a little bit more pricey and a little bit higher end. I did hear the food there is pretty good, though it is overly priced for what it is. But in terms of the stuff that we had around the park, it was very much theme park food. It wasn't necessarily anything that ever blew us away or had us really excited. If you've had food at the other Universal theme parks, I do think that you can know what to expect here in terms of that. But I did enjoy the theming of the different bars bars and restaurants that we did walk into. And I think the biggest disappointment by the end of it was that there was just so much to do, which is great because it gives you that inclining to go back, but there was so much that took up our time because it was going down consistently, or there was some sort of delay that ultimately removed our time in the day to go and see other things that we really wanted to see. And so that was an unfortunate side to it. There was a water show at the end as well in the center of the park, as where they play music from the various things that are a part of the park, and the water in this big fountain definitely dances around to the music. That's the general gist there. Overall, the only rides we didn't ride were the Ministry of Magic, as I already mentioned, as well as Dragon Racers Rally, which was another one in the How to Train Your Dragon section that we just didn't get around to. So overall, we rode almost everything, and my experience with Epic Universe is that I think it was a really fun theme park. I think in a lot of ways it's great in terms of the overall look, the feel, the overall just attention to detail. It's pretty phenomenal, and I think it has the opportunity to live up to its name of Epic Universe, but I do think there's a lot of kinks. There are certain attractions that are a little bit lackluster, and I do think it's going to really be about them honing down on certain experiences and fixing some of these situations and fixing how often a lot of these rides break down for it to be something that stands out. Unfortunately, because we were racing to do all the rides, we again ran out of time because of a lot of the technical issues. We did not get to see the Harry Potter show that they have in there. It's like a circus show, and as well as Untrainable Dragon, which is a How to Train Your Dragon show. I wanted to see those really badly, but the time just got away from us. So overall, I do look forward to going back to Epic Universe. I will say at this point, having seen majority of the park, while I loved parts of it, I think the things about it that are incredible are absolutely some of the best theme park stuff ever made. But the stuff that didn't work for me, I thought like really didn't work. Like some of the weakest stuff I've seen in any Universal park. And so I am excited to go back. I had a great time with my wife. I don't necessarily know that the park fully right now lives up to its name of Epic Universe, especially with it being at half capacity at these preview tickets. So I'm very, very worried for the people who have like first week, second week, third week tickets that are going to be there super packed, and they're only a few weeks away from release, and there's still some things I think they really need to work out in terms of kinks. But all in all, that's going to be my thoughts on Epic Universe. A great time. I think most people who go to this park are going to be blown away by how beautiful it looks, how well put together it is, how detailed these sections are, and how fun majority of the rides are. I think a lot of families, kids, adults are going to have a great time with it. I look forward to going back to Epic Universe, but I do have my gripes ultimately. I do think there were things about it that were pretty lackluster for how big the hype was, but I look forward to going back and having a new experience, being able to see what kinks they worked out, and being able to see, you know, Ministry of Magic, some of the things I really wanted to see, and re-experience some of the rides that I really love that I wish I had a second chance to ride. So that's going to be my thoughts on Epic Universe. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Are you guys planning on checking out Epic Universe? And if you already checked it out, what was your favorite ride? What was your least favorite ride? Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? I know this is a long video. I didn't intend it to be, but as I was talking about it, my mouth just kept going. So if you stuck around this long in the video, thanks so much. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.